welcome back to the deep dive. If you're looking to truly understand the hidden mechanisms of the world around you and maybe, shatter a few illusions while you're at it, you are definitely in the right place.
Yeah, glad to be back. We got a heavy one today.
We really do. But look, before we get into today's material, and
Mhm.
trust me, you are going to want to hear this do me a huge favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell.
For sure. You don't want to miss what we have coming down the pipeline.
Exactly. We are breaking down heavy, sometimes pretty controversial topics every single week, so stay tuned.
And today, we are not just reviewing an irregular book. We are effectively unpacking what the author describes as an emergency survival kit for the modern Western man.
Right. Today we're doing a deep dive into an ebook called Lions Led by Donkeys. Feminized Capture of Institutions with Cultural Marxism Tyrannizes Men. It's by Conrad Riker. And I mean, just from that title alone, you know this isn't going to be some polite, watered-down conversation about office politics.
No, definitely not. Riker actually frames this text as an intellectual weapon.
An intellectual weapon. I like that.
Yeah, it's designed as a red pill wake-up call, specifically for men who look at the state of the world today, the workplace, the dating market, the legal system, and just feel like something fundamental is broken.
It's for the guys who feel like the game is entirely rigged against them.
Precisely. And just to be clear up front, we are here to analyze Riker's arguments. We're breaking down his perspective and reporting on what the text actually says without taking sides.
Exactly. We're impartial explorers here. And his central metaphor is honestly quite powerful. He argues that Western civilization was built by lions, meaning men characterized by competence, high risk-taking, and this drive to conquer and build.
But he claims that today, this same civilization is being managed, and he would say slowly dismantled by donkeys.
Right. And when he says donkeys, he's not just talking about having a bad boss.
No, it's a very specific critique. He's referring to a type of feminized, bureaucratic mediocrity. The book argues these donkeys are agents of a system that actively prioritizes feelings over function.
Safety over achievement.
Exactly.
Look, I'm going to be completely honest right up front. We are going to cover a ton of ground today, from ancient history to evolutionary biology, all the way to the intricacies of the family court system.
It's a dense 16 chapters.
Yeah, and we can really only scratch the surface here. So if this analysis resonates with you, if you find yourself nodding along today and thinking, finally, someone actually said it, you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now, immediately. Buy the ebook.
Yeah, you really need the full arsenal of arguments Riker provides to get the complete picture. He builds his case layer by layer.
So let's start with the diagnosis. Riker doesn't waste time with pleasantries at all. He jumps right into the corporate workplace in Chapter 1.
Right, this is where he introduces the donkey manager concept. There's this anecdote about a Fortune 500 tech firm that perfectly sets the stage.
I remember that. He describes this team of elite systems architects. These are the guys keeping the digital lights on, writing incredibly complex Python code, pulling 80-hour weeks.
He calls them the real lions of industry.
Yeah.
And then the company brings in a new diversity officer.
Right. And the detail Riker hones in on is that this officer has a master's in gender studies, but she literally cannot write a single line of code.
Nothing. Zero technical competence in the highly specialized field she is now basically policing.
And this is where the conflict starts, according to the book.
Exactly. Riker notes that her first move isn't to look at improving efficiency or, product equality. It's to cancel the team's meritocratic stand-up meetings.
Because she felt the tone was too aggressive.
Right. And she replaces them with, and I actually had to double-check the text to make sure this wasn't satire, she replaces them with non-linear empathy circles.
I mean, it sounds like a sketch comedy bit, but Riker uses it to make a really serious economic point, doesn't he?
He does. He argues that high-level competence is a very scarce resource.
Yeah.
It's the primary currency of the lion. So when the diversity officer replaces a meritocratic hierarchy where the absolute best ideas win, with a social hierarchy based entirely on feelings and identity.
She is effectively devaluing the currency those engineers hold.
Exactly. She's changing the rules of the game so that their competence no longer grants them status.
So what actually happened in the anecdote? Did the engineers revolt? Did they go to HR?
No, and this is the key behavioral shift Riker identifies. The lions didn't fight back. They just ghosted.
Wow.
Yeah, the top engineers, whose intellectual capital was literally worth millions to the company, simply walked away. Riker calls this going galt. referencing Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged.
It's a fascinating look at what he terms the rational lion. Riker's argument is that men are biologically hardwired for a specific risk-to-reward dynamic.
Right. Historically, the reward for high-stress, high-competence work was status. It was resources and respect from the community.
But his analysis of the modern corporate environment is that the reward has been totally stripped away, while the risk has exponentially increased.
Exactly. Now, if you are a high-performing direct man in these spaces, you face the constant risk of HR tribunals. You risk being labeled toxic just for demanding excellence.
You risk cancellation.
So the rational lion looks at this equation, high risk, zero reward, plus active institutional hostility from the donkeys, and just says, I'm out.
I'm not playing.
Riker describes this as entering goblin mode or lying flat. He frames it as effectively a species-wide labor strike.
Men are withdrawing their competence because the system no longer pays for it with respect. And Riker argues this inevitably leads to societal collapse.
Which brings us to arguably one of the most provocative chapters in the entire book.
Oh yeah, matriarchy maxes out at mud huts.
The title is definitely designed to trigger a reaction.
So what exactly is the historical argument he's making there? Because it's a massive claim.
It's an anthropological claim, really. He posits that for roughly 200,000 years, pre-agricultural human societies were largely egalitarian or matriarchal. They focused on gathering, consensus building, and immediate subsistence.
And his point is that during that vast stretch of time, technology essentially stagnated.
Right, we were stuck. Riker argues that complex, high-risk structural civilization, think the pyramids, the moon landing, the internet, is exclusively a product of the patriarchal agrarian revolution.
Because that revolution incentivized male resource accumulation.
Yes, it incentivized long-term investment, physical risk-taking, and the imposition of order on natural chaos.
So the book's argument is that equality of outcome, which he heavily associates with a feminine or matriarchal ethos, is actually the direct enemy of progress.
In Riker's view, absolutely. He states that if your primary goal is making everyone feel safe and equal, you necessarily destroy the rigid competence hierarchy required to maintain complex systems.
You can't have a safe space and a high-performance space at the exact same time.
Not according to this text. And he gives a pretty terrifying modern example of what happens when donkeys try to run lion systems.
The Boeing 737 MX disaster.
That's the mud hut theory applied in real time. Riker points to the Boeing crashes as the ultimate fatal consequence of prioritizing corporate diversity targets and management bureaucracy over cold, hard engineering excellence.
Because physics doesn't care about your feelings or your HR quotas.
Right. Gravity doesn't negotiate with equity. Riker's point is that when you replace the lie engineers, who are obsessively focused on objective reality and performance, with bureaucratic donkeys who are just checking identity boxes, planes literally fall out of the sky.
He frames it as a literal matter of survival for Western civilization.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the diagnosis of the current state. Competence is being replaced by ideology, and as a result, massive systems are failing. But how did we get here? Because this didn't just happen by accident overnight.
No. And in the next section, Riker outlines what he calls the enemy's playbook. He traces this ideological shift directly back to the Frankfurt School.
Ugh, the long march through the institutions.
You got it. Riker traces the intellectual lineage back to mid-20th century theorists like Adorno and Marcuse. Basically, the book argues that classical Marxism failed in the West because the working class never revolted.
Because capitalism actually made them too comfortable. The workers got cars, they got TVs, a house in the suburbs. They had no interest in overthrowing the government.
Right. So the Frankfurt School intellectuals realized they simply couldn't win an economic war. They decided to wage a cultural war instead.
They shifted the revolutionary focus away from the proletariat and onto marginalized identity groups.
Exactly. And this leads to a foundational concept Riker unpacks: repressive tolerance.
This is Herbert Marcuse's idea, right?
Right.
And Riker argues it's basically the operating system of modern cancel culture.
Yes. Repressive tolerance is this twisted notion that to be truly tolerant in a way that actually advances the revolution, you must be actively intolerant of the right, or the traditional status quo.
So it justifies completely silencing any dissent under the guise of liberation.
It's a double standard by design.
That perfectly explains why someone can get fired and blacklisted for a single tweet. But actual physical violence in the name of progress is often excused or even celebrated by the institutions.
Riker would say that's the system working exactly as designed. But he doesn't just complain about the problem. He offers a specific tool to fight back against this ideological capture. He talks about the trivium.
I found this section really fascinating because he presents it as this kind of lost ancient knowledge. What is the trivium exactly in this context?
It's the classical method of critical thinking. It used to be the absolute foundation of Western education. It consists of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And Riker argues these have been deliberately removed from modern schools to keep men docile and easily manipulated.
Let's break those three down because I think this is the intellectual weapon part he mentioned at the start. How does he say we should use grammar?
Well, grammar in the trivium isn't just about commas and syntax. It's about defining your terms accurately. Riker insists that men must refuse to accept linguistic sabotage.
Give me an example.
He says you must flat out refuse to accept equity as a synonym for equality.
Because they mean fundamentally different things.
Right. Equality is equal opportunity. It's everyone starting at the same line. Equity is forced equal outcome. It's everyone finishing at the same line, regardless of effort or skill. Riker argues that if you let the donkeys redefine the words, you've already lost the argument before you even speak.
That makes total sense. And then there's logic.
Right, the art of non-contradictory identification, spotting fallacies. Riker spends a good amount of time dismantling the wage gap myth using strict logic.
He argues that the common statistic, the one saying women earn 80 cents to a man's dollar, is a massive manipulation of data, right?
Exactly. He points out that it completely ignores hours worked, willingness to take dangerous jobs, relocation, and individual career choices.
So the logic is, you cannot compare a part-time marketing assistant to a deep-sea welder working 80 hours a week and claim gender discrimination when their paychecks look different.
Precisely. Riker says presenting that as discrimination is a pure logical fallacy. And finally, there's rhetoric, the art of persuasion and frame control.
He talks about something called the satanic inversion here. That phrase sounds incredibly intense. What does he mean by that?
It is intense. He's describing a total society-wide flip of values, a culture where the true meaning biological reality is called a lie, where the beautiful classical aesthetics, physical fitness order is called oppression.
And where the good masculine protection and provision is labeled toxic.
Yes. Riker argues we are living in a world that has inverted reality itself. Up is down, left is right. And he claims rhetoric is the only way to cut through that fog and control the frame of the conversation.
It really is framed as a war on reality. And speaking of biological reality, Riker gets very biological in the next section. He uses a metaphor that, well, frankly, it's haunting, the anglerfish.
Chapter 11. It is incredibly visceral imagery. Riker describes the life cycle of the deep-sea anglerfish. In nature, the male anglerfish is tiny compared to the female. He finds her in the dark, bites onto her side, and then literally fuses with her body.
It just melts into her.
Physically, yes. His internal organs atrophy. He dissolves until he has nothing but a pair of gonads attached to her side, basically just providing genetic material whenever she demands it.
He loses his autonomy and identity completely to become a mere utility for the female.
That's the biology of it.
And Riker connects this deep-sea horror show to modern marriage.
He does. He argues that the modern legal contract of marriage, especially when combined with the welfare state, turns human men into anglerfish.
Wow.
He says men provide the resources, they fund the lifestyle, but within the modern legal framework, they have almost no authority, no real protection, and can be discarded by family courts while still being completely drained of their assets.
This links directly back to the evolutionary biology he discusses earlier, where he brings in Schopenhauer and the concept of hypergamy.
Right. Riker relies heavily on Arthur Schopenhauer's essay on women here. The evolutionary theory presented in the book is that women are reselected in their behavior, meaning they are biologically focused on immediate resource extraction and security for their offspring.
Whereas men, he argues, are case-selected, focused on long-term civilization building and legacy.
Yes. And because women generally lack the physical strength of men to take resources by force, Riker claims they evolved the capacity to use language, social pressure, and deception to secure those resources.
He calls it the evolutionary biology of deception.
That's the term he uses. And Riker's core grievance is that the modern state has now weaponized this biology against men on an institutional level.
Which brings us to the Dear Colleague letter. This is a very specific piece of recent history he points to regarding institutional capture.
Yes, this is crucial for understanding how the legal framework shifted. In 2011, the Obama administration used Title IX to issue the Dear Colleague letter to universities.
And what did that actually do?
It essentially forced universities, under threat of losing federal funding, to lower the standard of proof in sexual misconduct tribunals. They went from needing clear and convincing evidence to just a preponderance of evidence.
Which is basically what? 50.1% certainty.
Correct. Riker calls them campus kangaroo courts. He argues this policy effectively removed due process for young men on college campuses. The mere accusation became sufficient for expulsion and life-ruining punishment.
And then there's the policing side of things he tears into the Duluth model.
This is another specific policy Riker dissects. The Duluth model is a framework used by law enforcement. It posits that domestic violence is inherently patriarchal, that it's just a tool of men to control women.
So how does that play out in reality?
Well, police are often trained under this model to arrest the male by default when responding to a call. Riker points out that even if the man is the one who called the police, or even if he is the one visibly bleeding, the institutional assumption is that he must be the primary aggressor.
That seems to ignore a massive amount of data on reciprocal violence.
Riker argues it absolutely ignores the data. He says it enforces a purely political narrative. Men are always predators, and women are always victims.
And perhaps the most shocking part of this legal breakdown is his discussion on paternity fraud.
This is where that anglerfish metaphor feels the most real in the text. Riker points out that in many legal jurisdictions, the overriding standard is the best interests of the child.
Which sounds good on paper.
Right. But Riker argues the state interprets that almost exclusively as securing financial support. So even if a man gets a DNA test that scientifically proves he is not the biological father of a child.
Family courts often enforce child support payments anyway.
Exactly. Because the court just wants someone to pay the bill so the state doesn't have to foot it.
That is wild.
Riker calls this the ultimate cuckoldry. He defines it as state-enforced slavery, where a man is legally forced to labor for years to raise another man's genetic line. He frames it as the donkey system completely crushing the lion to extract resources.
It's incredibly heavy stuff. Riker really paints a bleak picture of a system that is rigged from the bottom up from our basic DNA all the way to the Department of Justice.
He certainly doesn't pull any punches.
But, and I think this is really important for you listening, Riker doesn't just leave us in the pit of despair. The final section of the book is called Rebuilding the Citadel. He actually has a plan.
He does. And interestingly, his solution is not political. It's not about voting harder or trying to reform the system from within. It starts with a concept he calls sovereign diversification.
Starve the beast.
Exactly. This is very practical financial advice from Chapter 15. Riker advises men to put at least 20% of their liquid assets into unseizable hard money, things like gold, silver, or Bitcoin.
Why Bitcoin specifically?
Because it operates outside the traditional banking system. Riker argues that fiat currency, the US dollar, is simply a tool of the donkey state used to stealthily steal your labor through inflation.
So, by holding assets that the state cannot easily freeze, confiscate, or devalue, you regain a tangible measure of personal sovereignty.
Right. You secure your baseline independence. And then he moves to the physical aspect, which he calls the Iron Church.
I really like this part.
It's a great concept. Riker applies the evolutionary handicap principle here. He argues that building a muscular, highly capable physical body signals excess energy and discipline. It is a biological marker of competence that simply cannot be faked.
He has that great line in there about gravity.
Yes. He says lifting heavy weights is a direct interaction with objective reality. 200 pounds is exactly 200 pounds. It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care about your political identity or your pronouns. It completely forces you to be honest with yourself.
In a world built on the satanic inversion and bureaucratic lies, the gym is the one place where absolute truth still exists.
It's the physical manifestation of truth. You either lift the bar or you don't.
And what about socially? He talks about going Galt again, but in terms of building parallel institutions.
Right. Riker argues that trying to reform these captured woke corporations is a complete waste of time and energy. The donkeys are way too entrenched in HR and middle management.
So what's the move?
He says competent men need to build their own guilds. Withdraw your labor from the structures that actively hate you. Start your own businesses that explicitly do not have HR departments. Hire other highly competent lions based strictly on merit.
And then there's what he calls the boycott of the simp.
That's his core social strategy. Riker says men must absolutely stop giving their attention, their money, and their validation to women or institutions that vilify masculinity.
Stop feeding the machine that wants to crush you.
Exactly. The total withdrawal of consent. Starve them of the attention they crave.
He also mentions reclaiming the canon. He advises reading Aristotle, Isaac Newton, the classic great books. Why is reading old books such a key part of a modern survival strategy?
He refers to these books as shields of the soul. Riker argues that the modern donkey education system deliberately removes these texts because they teach objective logic, honor, and strict hierarchy.
So by reading them, you inoculate yourself against postmodern nihilism.
Yes, you reconnect with the living spirit of Western civilization. You remind yourself that you come from a long, proud lineage of lions.
It's ultimately about becoming a man who simply cannot be manipulated by shame or guilt.
Precisely. Riker wants the reader to become the fully actualized, rational lion. Someone who has mastered the trivium, secured his own finances, hardened his physical body, and absolutely refuses to apologize for his masculine nature.
This brings us toward the end of our time, but honestly, it feels like we've barely cracked the spine on this one.
Oh, we really have. The book is incredibly dense. There is so much more in the text about the specific mechanics of rhetorical combat. There's a deep dive into the history of the grievance studies hoax, and a really profound philosophical section on the will to power.
Yeah, if you want the full blueprint, you have to read the source material yourself. We're just giving you the map.
You really do.
But Riker does leave us with a final provocative thought that I want to touch on. He calls it the nuclear option of truth.
Yes. This is his idea that in a world constructed entirely of lies, simply speaking basic biological reality out loud, just saying a man is a man, is an act of total revolution.
It burns down the cathedral of lies.
He argues that truth is completely radioactive to the current bureaucratic system. It can't process it.
And here's a thought to leave you with, building on that, something we didn't explicitly cover earlier, but that hangs over the whole book. If Riker is right about the satanic inversion, and that the system is entirely parasitic, then its collapse isn't just a cultural possibility, it's a mathematical certainty.
How do you mean?
Well, the donkeys can't build. They can only manage and consume what the lions have already built. So eventually, they will run out of other people's competence to harvest. The ultimate red pill might just be patience. Realizing that biological reality always wins a war of attrition, you just have to build your citadel and outlast them.
That's a powerful way to look at it. Survival through competence.
The spell is broken, the truth is yours. That's exactly how Riker signs off the book.
It's a huge call to arms. Not for physical violence, but for intellectual competence, objective reality, and deep self-respect.
Absolutely. Listen, if this deep dive fired you up today, if you feel like you've been waiting for someone to clearly articulate exactly what you've been seeing happening in your workplace, in the dating market, and in the culture, you need to get this book.
Don't hesitate.
Go to Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks right now and buy Lions Led by Donkeys. Don't wait around. Get the intellectual weapons you need.
It really is an essential manual for navigating the modern landscape. And for ongoing real-time updates, Riker is very active over on Substack.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you can follow him at Conrad Riker. He posts regular analysis there that perfectly complements the material in the book.
Go check that out today. And hey, before you click away, don't forget to like this deep dive and subscribe to the channel. We are going to keep bringing you the hard truths and the knowledge they really don't want you to have. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Stay rational. Stay strong out there.
We'll see you next time.